will now bring this meeting to order. Call it to order with the roll call, please.
Meeting called to order at 9:03 a.m. Directors Veerkamp, Anzini, Dwyer, and Day present. General Manager Abercrombie, General Counsel Polson, and Clerk to the Board Sullivan present. Director Osborne is absent.
All right. So we will now adopt the agenda, absent closed.
Actually,
wait a
can we
minute.
do the Pledge of Allegiance
I
and a
didn't.
moment of silence?
We will do the Pledge of Allegiance. All these directions. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So now we will motion to adopt the agenda absent closed session A.
Move we adopt the agenda, removing closed session A.
Madam Chair, if I may, could we either move item 14 up to right after the consent, or move it to consent? I don't know how the rest of you feel about that, if you don't want to move it to consent.
Yeah,
at least-
the president can do that easily.
Yes.
We don't have to formally adopt it.
Okay, so we will
Yeah.
move item number 14 on the consent calendar up to,
Right after consent.
Right after the
Before the workshop items.
yes, before workshop items. All right, all those in favor in adopt. I thought I heard you.
It was Day and Veerkamp.
Right. Thank you.
Somebody.
I'll just make this meeting really exciting today. So anyway, there's a motion to adopt the agenda. Consent calendar, I'm sorry.
No, you're right, it's the agenda.
The agenda.
If members of the public would like to address the
Thank you.
board at any public comment period, please refer to the detailed instructions on page 2 of today's agenda. So we're looking for public comment on the adoption of today's agenda. And at this time, it does not appear there are any members of the public wishing to comment on the adoption of the agenda.
All right,
Ready for the vote?
thank you.
Division 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right, we'll move to communications. General Manager?
Good morning. From time to time, we receive letters from the public appreciating our service to them. Today, I'd like to highlight an employee that received a letter from our staff recognizing their performance during the high turbidity events of last year. That time, District Water Supervisor Bill Pedersen, acting as the manager of water operations, and his outstanding team of operators up there, and distribution operators, mechanics, construction, maintenance workers, all pitched in to resolve a real big issue when we had extremely high turbidities when we had the big rainstorm back in December. Bill led his team multiple days, 24-hour operations. I would say improvising, adapting, and overcoming challenges that we never expected. Well, we kind of expected it, but we never saw it that high. And Bill and his team, again, both in October and December, did a remarkable job in keeping our water safe for our customers, managing high turbidity, increasing backwashing, getting extra pumps in there to do all this stuff with never having one issue on safe drinking water for our customers. So I wanted to personally thank Bill today and his team, and Rodenko for, providing his leadership to get Bill, as proficient as possible to do just a great job for our customers. It was truly remarkable. Thank you. And he just got back from vacation, so I'm sure he was really expecting this.
Yeah, Dan gave me a little heads up.
Come on up.
Yeah, Dan gave me a little heads up on what to expect here today. I just want to say thank you. I really appreciate it. It means a lot to me. Trying to be an effective leader, you kind of come to realize you're only effective as a team. And we're very fortunate to have dedicated employees in this industry. So, thank you.
Thank you.
Great job, Bill.
Great job.
Please pass it on to the teams up there. Thank you. That concludes the recognition
thank you.
report.
Okay. We will now move to public comment. And this is an opportunity for the public to speak on any item that is not on the agenda. Clerk of the Board, do we have anybody online?
It does not appear at this time we have any members of the public wishing to speak on today's open public comment period.
Okay. So we'll move on to communications. General Manager.
Nothing else today, thank you.
All right. Clerk of the Board.
None today, thank you.
Any Board of Directors? Yes. Director Dwyer.
Yes, Madam Chair, I have a couple of things. One is, I was alerted by a neighbor, and maybe this has happened in the past, that they were received by mail a solicitation that was titled Information Regarding Your Exterior Water Line. And of course, they immediately think of EID. And what it is it's a form of home insurance that, quote, covers from the meter to their house in case there's a water leak. And it's, not cheap, about $50 a year, I guess. And it's certainly the homeowner's decision whether they want to acquire this insurance or not. But I thought we should all be aware that this thing's going around for rural water line.
Thank you.
And then I have one other. Karen Cross in our communications department does a good job of reviewing all of the newspapers for articles that relate to our business. And some time ago, she highlighted one that's Tuolumne. Their main canal just failed, and so they had to cut service to several customers. And I think that reinforces, even before the Caldor fire, our efforts to strengthen and make that canal better. So there's an example of, I think we're moving in the right way with our capital investments. End of report.
Thank you. Yes. Director Beer?
Yes, we have a LAFCO meeting Wednesday night. Also, the draft MSR now is out for the fire districts as well as the service area 3 and 7. So I'm on a ad hoc committee to review that information, and we'll be working through that. So again, LAFCO Wednesday night at 5:30.
All right. Director Day, anything? Okay. This concludes our communications. Now we'll move on to approve the consent calendars. The General Counsel has requested that I would like you to explain it.
Yep, I requested that we pull item number 7 from the consent calendar and then consider that after the consent calendar has been adopted.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7.
I'll move the approval of the consent calendar with pulling item number 7.
Yes.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded to approve the consent calendar with item number 7 being first on the list. All those in favor?
Aye. Sorry.
Actually, we're just going to do public comment.
Oh, that's
really
right, I'm
quick.
sorry. Public comment? Nobody's jumping to the gun here? Okay.
Actually, we do have one person. We have Director Osborne.
Okay. That would be Director Osborne's on the phone?
Yes. You have to unmute, George.
just maybe if I could just so that the rest of the board and the public is aware, Director Osborne wanted to participate in today's meeting, but we weren't able to agendize his location for participation with sufficient time, to comply with the Brown Act. So consequently, Director Osborne is participating remotely, but not, unfortunately, as a board member, since we couldn't notice it and allow the public to be present in his place of residence at the
Is
moment.
it, Brian, is that, so the emergency order that the governor had ordered, that has expired?
Yeah, that's correct. And you'll recall, we had a brief discussion about how the legislature tried to address that. They did so by passing AB 361 last year, which does allow for continued teleconference meetings, but it requires certain procedures be followed ahead of time, including the declaration of an emergency and finding that there's an imminent need to participate remotely. And the board hasn't taken that action, so that was another reason why Director Osborne is basically participating as a member of the public today.
Correct. And otherwise, he'd have to put a piece of sheet of paper where he's at to let the public know that he's there. All right.
Okay, go ahead, George.
To put a piece of paper on my front yard. Anyway, no, I just wanted to say I concur with the consent calendar. I had a question on item 5. General Manager Abercrombie responded with the reasonings, rationale for it, and I'm certified to certainly happy to go along with the board's 4-zip decision if that's what it comes out to be.
All right, thank you very much, Director Osborne. All right. We have a motion and second on the consent calendar as modified. All those in favor?
Division 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. So we'll go to item number
7.
7.
Thanks very much, President Anzini. I appreciate you pulling that per my request. The reason that I asked the board to consider this one separately is because I wanted to report to the board that late Friday afternoon, the district was able to reach tentative agreement with the engineering bargaining unit of the Employees Association. And so that tentative agreement was on the same terms that are articulated in the MOU for the general bargaining unit, which is the subject of item number 7. And so what I am proposing is that in order to take action on the tentative agreement reached with the engineering unit and the general unit under the same terms, the board take option number 2 under agenda item 7, take other action as directed by the board. And the only change to option 1 would be to add the words engineering units to the general unit. So it would read, adopt the negotiated memorandum of understanding between the El Dorado Irrigation District and the Association of El Dorado Irrigation District Employees General and Engineering Units for the term January 1, 2022 to December 31st, 2024, and the accompanying revised pay schedule. This should also say for the general unit, since we weren't able to add a revised pay schedule for the engineering unit. That can be taken at a subsequent action. We'll bring that to the board at the next meeting. But for purposes of today's action, again, I'm requesting that the board take option 2 per the changes that I just mentioned.
I'll move option 2 as articulated by our general counsel.
Second.
Okay. It's been motioned and seconded to approve item number 7 modified by option 2, including the engineering group. All right, public comment here on this.
Director Osborne?
I concur. I concur.
Okay, just for the record,
He doesn't get a vote.
because Director Osborne is participating today as a member of the public due to us not being able to post his location and time, he is not allowed to deliberate or vote on any items. However, he does like to participate and wants to be included, so he's allowed to talk during the public comment period. But I just wanted, it for the record that it will not be included as a vote. And you don't have to you're still unmuted, so you don't have to keep raising your hand. Do you have more to say, Director Osborne?
No, I just wish I was there.
I know, and we all wish you were here.
Maybe. We know he had fun, whatever he did.
We don't have any additional members of the public wishing to speak on consent calendar item number 7, option 2, moved by Director Day and seconded by Director Veerkamp. We're ready for the vote.
Yes. Ready for the vote?
Division 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Okay, that ends the consent calendar. We will move on to workshop items.
Item 14.
Wait a minute. Now I've been corrected.
We moved item 14.
Oh, we moved item 14 up to before the workshop items? Yes. So item number 14. This is about our recycled water.
Well, good morning.
Good
My
morning.
name is Mike Brink. I'm Supervisor of Development Services here at the district. We're here to, Jennifer, get the slides up here. We're here today to have you consider making a determination that the use of recycled water for Serrano's Village A14 is not required. And today I do have Kirk Bone and Tom Howard with Serrano here to answer any questions.
Are there any questions regarding this item? Oh, the presentation's coming on? I feel like I'm in the dark here. Use this.
Next slide, please.
There we go.
So there's been numerous previous board actions related to recycled water. The key ones have been in 2006, the board adopted board policy 7010 regarding the reuse of recycled water. In 2013, the board adopted the 2013 wastewater master plan, which had an exhibit showing the general recycled water service area. 2014, the board made the determination that the use of recycled water for single-family homes within the Carson Creek development was not required. Next slide, please. In 2018, the board heard 3 different items related to Serrano J6 and J7 and made the ultimate determination that the use of recycled water for single-family homes within J6 and J7 was not required. Excellent. This is right. Summary of the issues. The proposed Serrano Village A14 development consists of 51 residential lots. The development is located in an area that is subject to mandatory recycled water use per our master plan, and staff recommends that the development not be required to use recycled water. Next slide. Again, per board policy 7010, the board can determine that use of recycled water is not required. Next slide. The recycled water system. Currently, recycled water demands exceed recycled water supply, requiring supplementation with potable water. Residential lots are getting smaller and landscaping ordinances getting more drought tolerant, resulting in less recycled water use and, less irrigation use and reducing the benefit of using recycled water. And as I mentioned, the lands subject to mandatory recycled water use are defined by our master plans. Next slide. This is an exhibit from our master plan. You can see kind of the middle, all the pink areas are the general areas where recycled water is proposed. The Serrano A14 development is shown in the center. Next slide. This is a blow up of the area. This is the west is to the left. This is a Silver Valley off-ramp with the proposed Serrano A14 development shown in the white shaded area. Next slide. Again, the proposed development includes 51 residential lots. The lot size is very small, 3,600 square foot, so not much landscape area. The small lot size combined with the state's landscape ordinance results in a very low irrigation demand. We also have the issue of the small lot frontages and narrow roads. Makes it very difficult to install the sanitary sewers, potable water, dry utilities, and the recycle water lines to meet the state and EID requirements. Next slide. This exhibit showing a typical proposed lot within A14. The diagonal hatch area is the footprint of the building. You can see in the back there's a patio and there's driveway and hardscape in the front, so there's very little left in non-hardscape area to irrigate. Next slide. We are proposing that, this slide here shows the entrance into A14. The areas highlighted in yellow are proposed to be irrigated with recycled water using existing recycled water lines that are in Rusty Ranch Drive to the north, but no common area irrigation within A14 at all, or no recycled water pipes either. Next slide.
Could you clarify, so will the common area be potable as well? Or
There's, as far as I understand, there's no potable area or no common area beyond the gates within A14.
okay.
So now, moving on to estimated water usage. We recall the 2020 Urban Water Management Plan estimated water demand for future connections. And that was at 0.44 acre feet per year per lot. We do have more recent data based on the Serrano Village J7, which the board approved not using recycled water. Based on a full year of annual usage for occupied lots there, their usage is 0.37 acre feet per year. And those lots are actually bigger than what's proposed in A14, so very little usage. And based on the small size of lots, it's estimated that no more than half of the annual demand would be actual outdoor irrigation demand for these lots. Next slide. Moving on to supplementation and seasonal storage. In 2020, the actual annual recycled water demand was just over 3,900 acre feet, of which 750 acre feet was met with potable water supplementation. That's a full 19% of potable water going to the purple pipes. At some point in the future, recycled water supply may be able to be met with recycled water, as assuming we get more homes online that generate wastewater, but also assuming we don't have more recycled water demand.
I have a question for you. On talking about that you have more homes that are using water, using the sewage plants, and eventually would we have to upgrade our treatment plants? Because we don't have enough storage for recycled water?
Right now, we have storage at the Dorado Hills wastewater treatment plant for the pond that's behind the plant there. What we don't have, and actually the next bullet here I'll speak to, the key is in the second bullet there is with more homes online on a daily basis, you'd have more influent to the wastewater treatment plants, so more effluent to make recycled water on a daily basis without having to store that water. So what comes in goes out.
Right, but we still
So
don't
the
have.
hope is someday, provided we don't hook up any more homes on recycled water, that the existing customers maybe someday will reach close to a break even if there's enough volume from new homes, and then we can get through the summer peak period, which is when we have to supplement so much.
Correct. I also recognize that the indoor fixture units are getting much more efficient, so there is less influent coming to the plants per house than there was in the past, just because everything's so efficient these days.
Okay.
Well, your question, Director Anzini, about seasonal storage. So back in 2011, we did look at constructing seasonal storage. And at that time determined that potable water supplementation was more cost effective. Back in using $2008, the construction of that reservoir was $7.4 million, which is $108 million in today's dollars. There's also ongoing operational costs with storing water and then retreating it before putting it in the purple pipe. So determination was supplementation was more cost effective.
And for that amount of money, it's only 2,500 acre feet of storage, Mike?
Yeah, that was.
So it's very small storage,
For each tank is 25, yeah.
or
It was-
ponds.
It was
The
one
ponds themselves.
reservoir sized at 2,500 acre feet to store that water in the winter and then take it out during the summer and
Right.
not have use potable supplementation. But it's a
Thank
very expensive project for little benefit. Next slide.
I'm sure the developers would want to pay for it.
Tom, Kirk? There's also compliance costs with recycled water, so adding additional dual plumb homes adds to the district annual recycled water compliance and inspection costs. And those costs are recovered through our recycled water rates, and these homes would not generate much rate revenue because there's very little irrigation. Next slide. So based on all that, based on the current status of recycled water availability, decreased amount of potable water supplementation, and the district long-term operational costs associated with the small A14 development, it's staff's recommendation that Serrano Village A14 not be mandated to use recycled water. Next slide. Oh. Next slide. It's showing up here.
We're having some delays in Zoom today. I'm not sure why, but we're seeing the correct slide over here. Oh, there it goes.
So board options, option 1, determine that the use of recycled water for the irrigation of single-family homes within Serrano Village A14 is not economically feasible. Option 2, take other action. Option 3, no action. Our recommendation today is option 1.
I'll move option 1 with a comment. I think it's important for us to encourage conservation and, of course, encourage reuse of recycled water where it makes sense. And I think in our enthusiasm to comply with the water conservation, maybe we went a little bit overboard in making these sweeping recommendations in our water plan, and we should back up and rethink that. You know, certainly along parkways and common areas, it may make sense to require the recycled water, and I think it's appropriate in turf and that sort of thing. For individual residents, I think you pointed out, there's not only the investment cost of putting in the recycled water service to every home, but also there's an ongoing maintenance cost of trying to maintain that, read the meters. And so I think I certainly move to adopt option 1, but I also think we might want to step back and instead of each time that we have a proposed development that requires recycle, let's turn it around and say, we'll have it required on a as-needed basis.
I'll second the motion and follow up with the question on that. How many other projects are potentially online that would, quote unquote, be mandatory recycle that we'd have to do this over and over?
Yeah, there's very few. There's some infill lots within Serrano, which makes sense to, and actually all the pipes are there. The one exhibit I showed earlier, I'm here today because the board policy says we must get your approval. Normally, we're like recycled water, or excuse me, potable water and sewer, we make the determination at staff level if it's feasible to extend. So there's very few. We are going to be upgrading our integrated water master plan. And at that point, we intend to look at that exhibit I showed you from the master plan and make these changes you recommend. And so we don't have to be back here every time that get your guidance.
And as we are forced to comply with the indoor water standards, that's going to compound the problem in generating adequate wastewater flows to expand the recycled water system. One thought the board may have is that we modify that policy and allow staff to go through on essentially the same analysis to determine whether or not it's viable to put recycled water in. That certainly would require direction from the board for me to bring something back to you.
Okay. It's been motioned and seconded, and we would like to take a comment from the public.
Yes, we do have a comment from Director Osborne.
Good morning again. Going back a few years, the rationale for doing this was that we had application to, in conjunction with the water agency to increase our water rights, and the rationale behind this was that husbanding as much potable water as we possibly could do. That was the impetus behind the reasoning for enacting that blanket action to incorporate recycled water and all development down there. Now, with a proviso that where it was economically or rationally effective to do so. So I think that falls within those parameters that when staff determines that it falls outside of the norm, so to speak, that they're given the projection or the authorization to proceed. And I would just I concur with the comments that maybe we need to review this thing.
Okay, thank you very much, Director Osborne. All right, any other comments from the public?
No, it does not appear there are any more members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 14, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and second by Director Day. And I just want to comment one more time. Director Osborne is speaking during the open comment period. He is not deliberating, and his vote will not be considered.
Thank you. All right. Here's our opportunity to vote.
Division 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
Thank you. We'll move on to the workshop items now.
Okay, good morning, board and members of the public. I'm Brian Polson, General Counsel. I'm going to be providing an update on the ongoing effort to redraw the district's division boundary lines in order to comply with federal law after the 2020 census. Go ahead, Jen. So the next, this is just, reciting a couple of the last presentations that we've had on this topic. You can move to the next slide. The next couple of slides, or few slides, are going to look fairly familiar. You've seen these before. Again, this is just the intro to sort of set the stage for today's discussion. The 2020 federal census requires that we adjust our division lines in order to ensure that our divisions comply with federal law regarding equal population and anti-discrimination. Go ahead, you can move to the next slide. Again, those are the two standards that I just articulated. Next slide. And our own board policies require that we consider other factors, including just population equality and anti-discrimination. And those are these factors here. Again, you've seen this, and we're going to talk in a fair amount of detail about these items today. You can move to the next slide. And these are, this is just a list of the kinds of secondary factors that the board may want to consider as it starts to look at redrawing its division boundary lines. And we're going to show you some maps that reflect some of these kinds of ideas today. Next slide, please. Okay, so now we get into the good stuff. This is new. So this is the bulk of the meeting, or my presentation will focus on a series of maps that we've generated here. None of the maps that I'm going to present today are draft alternatives for division boundaries. That will come in my next presentation. We're actively working on those maps right now. But the maps that I'm going to show you today are intended to illustrate the kinds of information that the board and the district should consider as it considers how to redraw its lines in order to meet the objectives that we just went through. As I mentioned, federal law requires that the district's division lines be drawn in a way that does not impede access to votes along the lines or because of race, language, ethnicity, or other factors. This is the anti-discrimination part of the law. And so what we've done is we've reviewed the census data to identify significant, the breakdown of ethnicity for example. And we've mapped out one of the key pieces of information, and that is I'm sure it's no surprise that the dominant ethnicity in El Dorado County is Caucasian. It's about high 70%, if I recall correctly. The next most populous ethnicity is Hispanic, and it's about 12% of the county's population. And everything after that is very small. We're talking in the single digits percentage-wise. And so what I've tried to do here, and this was just, I'm kind of just copying what we did in 2011, but is to map out the geographic distribution of the next most populous ethnicity in the county. And so as you can see here, the division boundaries are shown. And within the division boundaries are shown the census blocks that are shaded in various shades of green to reflect the density of the county's Hispanic population. And what you can see from this map, I mean, the takeaway from this map is that the population reflected here is widely distributed, and that's good news for us in terms of drawing division boundaries, because what it tells us is that it would be virtually impossible for the district to draw lines, division boundary lines, that would impede the voting power of this particular ethnicity. They're just too evenly dispersed throughout the county. So that's good news. That makes our job a little easier in terms of how we're going to draw the lines. Next slide, please. This next slide, I think I showed this the last time. This reflects the community service district boundaries within the county or the district's service territory. I know that's a little bit hard to see because some of the font is a little bit small. But the point here is just that in certain instances or in certain geographic places, there may or may not be a community service district with boundary lines of its own that we may want to consider as we think about how to draw our own boundary lines. And so this, as well as several others we're going to consider, is one piece of information that we may want to consider. You can see that on the far western side of the county, the El Dorado Hills Community Services District is quite large. And then you have Cameron Park Community Services District next to that, and then quite a number of smaller community service districts that are dispersed throughout the county. Next slide, please. This is a new map that we generated that reflects the county's what are called zones of benefit overlaid over the district's current division boundaries. Zones of benefit, I have to profess I'm not an expert in this, but zones of benefit are established by the County Board of Supervisors. They're overseen by the Department of Transportation as a way of assessing, as a way of generating funds that are unique to that particular area. So for example, you might have an area where road maintenance fees are unique to that area, and so there's a zone of benefit that's been established by the county and overseen by the Department of Transportation for that purpose. There are many other purposes as far as I'm aware, but we felt like that is useful information because what it tells us is that these particular areas have been identified by the county as unique communities of interest. And so these are areas that we might want to consider as we think about how to draw our own division lines. And Director Veerkamp, please, if I've misstated something, you have much more experience in this particular topic than I do. So, next slide, please. Next map. This is the county's land use designations reflected over our shown over our division boundary lines. And again, I know there's a lot of information here, a lot of colors and information. It's probably not possible to consider every single one of these and draw lines that takes into account every one of the pieces of information that I'm sharing today. But I'm sharing this to reflect that these are some of the informational items that staff has determined, yeah, these probably do warrant our consideration as we think about how to draw our own boundary lines, 'cause particularly if you consider, for example, where the county has designated high-density residential development, for example, and you can see that in yellow, and where that's located on the map, large land, the western, most of it in the western part of the service area. Where is it designated open space, et cetera. Next slide, please. This is a map that reflects the recently revised El Dorado County Supervisorial districts. The county was a little bit ahead of us in terms of the redistricting process, and so these lines reflect the divisions that they just created or they just modified. Now these are going to be, so the map is you have to look at the dark shaded lines are our current division boundaries, and then the background are the county's supervisor district boundaries. Obviously, the county is much larger than our own service area, and so the division boundaries are going to be quite a bit different than what ours will be, but it's information, again, worth considering. Next slide, please. Along the same lines, this map reflects the recently adopted congressional and California Assembly district divisions. I've not included here the California Senate district lines because there's just one for our entire service area, so there's no boundary line to consider. It is interesting to note that at least the Assembly district and in some parts the congressional district lines do correspond with our existing division lines in certain areas, and that's probably because they're utilizing some of the same factors that we've utilized to create division boundaries, such as Highway 50, for example. And you see that black and the red line using Highway 50. Actually, that's not Highway 50, but it does look like, what road is that? Anyway, highways and major road thoroughfares are commonly used to divide divisions, and it looks like we share the same division boundary in certain parts of our service area. Next slide, please. Okay, having considered some of those factors, what I'd like to do today is to discuss with the board an approach for how we might evaluate mapping alternatives. We could come up with an infinite number of different maps that divide up the district divisions in slightly different ways, and we could probably justify any one of those based upon the information that I just showed you, as well as many other community of interest types of information. But there are certain key, what I consider to be sort of key factors that I think that we can utilize to evaluate how we're going to draw our own division line. So the first is how we treat the communities of interest associated with EID services, those being water, wastewater, and recycled water. And I'll show some additional information about that. In other words, how do we create lines considering where our customers are? Okay, and then the next factor is how do we, I put split, but you could also say, how do we split or consolidate communities with more dense population, those being El Dorado Hills, Cameron Park, and to a lesser extent Diamond Springs, El Dorado, and the city of Placerville. There are others, of course, but I'm just, for example, how do we treat these more densely developed communities? And then finally, how can we minimize the disruption to the voter when we're moving lines around? Because of course, voters have, they've been represented in a certain way, and by moving boundary lines, we're going to, in some instances, change the representative on this board for that particular voter. And in certain instances, that voter may not have had an opportunity to vote and won't have an opportunity to vote for a few more years if, depending on where where they live in terms of how the division boundary lines are adjusted. And so we want to try and minimize that. Now, it would be impossible to entirely eliminate any disruption whatsoever, and the law does not require that we eliminate any disruption. But we sort of owe it to the voter to minimize the disruption as much as we can, considering the other factors as well. Next slide, please. Okay, so I'm going to start by talking about how our current divisions represent each of these classifications of customer, water, sewer, and recycled. And this chart, or table rather, shows that distribution as it is currently reflected in our division boundaries. Obviously, you can see from this table that most of the wastewater and recycled water customers are in divisions 2, 4, and 5, with no recycled customers in divisions 1 or 3, and very few wastewater customers in those divisions compared with the others, and for obvious reasons. Next slide, please. This table reflects the water customers by the type of metered connection, I believe is what this is. So agriculture, commercial, on down the list there, single-family residential at the very bottom of the table. No need to memorize this, but it is information that we'll show in some maps here. Next slide, please. Okay, so I highlighted that this, how we draw lines vis-a-vis our own customer base will be important. I wanted to highlight that, in this exercise, there's a question about, is it better to consolidate services into how they're represented on this board of directors, or is it better to spread them out evenly, right? On the one hand, if you consolidate them, you have fewer representatives on this board, but they might have more influence. Whereas if you spread them out, they have more representation on this board, but maybe not as much influence in their particular division. There's no wrong or right answer to this question, and I don't have a recommendation for the board. It will largely depend on this, along with, in combination with some of the other factors that we've discussed. In 2011, the board adopted an alternative, our current alternative, that spread the wastewater and recycled water divisions among divisions 2, 4, and 5. And most of the ag and small farm customers in divisions 1, 2, and 3. That may turn out to be the way we decide to go this time around, or we may decide to do something different, but I wanted to highlight that. Next slide, please. This map shows what the table a couple of slides ago showed, which is our current recycled water customers within our existing division boundaries. And you can see the vast majority of the recycled water customers are located in divisions 4 and 2, with a significant number in division 5 as well, but with none in divisions 1 or 3. Next slide, please. This map reflects the wastewater customers. And here you can see vast majority of the wastewater customers in divisions 2, 4, and 5, with a fairly significant number of customers in division 1 and a lesser extent in division 3. On this slide, we see where our agriculture or small farm customers are located, and fairly significant, that they're widely distributed here, the ag customers. Not as many in Divisions 4 and 5, but fairly spread across Divisions 1, 2, and 3. Okay, so moving on then to the next factor, and how do we split or consolidate the population, the most populous areas of the district's service area. And so what I've done here is to just highlight that in 2011, the board had adopted an alternative that divided El Dorado Hills using the Serrano Parkway and Latrobe Road as a boundary, largely between, essentially between Divisions 2, 4, and 5. So El Dorado Hills being the most populous area within the district's, most densely populated, I should say, area within the district's service area. That 2011 alternative, our current boundaries, use they divide Cameron Park at Highway 50, so north and south, with south of 50 being represented by Division 2 and north of 50 largely being represented by Division 4. Next slide, please. Now, to represent that, I would just refer you to our current boundaries, which we've seen many times as an overlay on all of the maps that we've just discussed. So, moving then to the third factor for how to evaluate mapping alternatives, this is the voter disruption one. And as I said, this is something that we're going to try and minimize, although not entirely eliminate, because I think that would be impossible. But the goal here is to try and reduce to the extent practicable the number of blocks and the associated parcels within those blocks that are moved from even divisions to odd divisions. And the reason for that is that in 2022, later this year, customers within our even-numbered divisions will have an opportunity to vote on their respective board representatives, whereas customers in odd-numbered divisions had that opportunity in 2020. If we move even-numbered division customers into odd-numbered customers, then they won't be able to vote in 2022, and they won't vote until 2024, which means that they will have had a longer, approximately 6 years between the time that they last voted and will next get to vote on their own district representative. And that's what we mean by voter disruption. It would be better to move odd-numbered customers into even-numbered districts because they would have only gone 2 years and they'd have an opportunity to vote again. And that's better than the opposite. Now, again, is that possible? Probably not to entirely avoid, but it's something that we may want to consider. And as we evaluate mapping alternatives, maybe there's 2 of them that the board likes, based upon the services and how our customer bases are represented evenly throughout the districts or otherwise. And then we might say, well, how does this particular mapping alternative impact our voters? And that might be a deciding factor for us. So just something that I wanted to highlight. Next slide, please. So that's kind of where we're at the moment. I wanted to let the board know that we have begun to actively develop draft mapping alternatives. They're not ready for prime time just yet, so that's why I'm not showing them, but they are. We've got several alternatives under development at the moment. I anticipate at the next presentation, which will occur at the second meeting in February, currently we're scheduled, I will present those draft maps. We'll, subject to your feedback, evaluate those maps on the criteria that we've talked about and any other criteria that you instruct, and then go back to the drawing board after that, after we've aired those drafts and gotten feedback from the board and the public. We continue to maintain our website, the page on our website dedicated to redistricting. So this presentation and all of the past presentations are currently available from this link and the website. And as we develop additional information, all of that gets posted to the website so that the public can stay involved. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's the update that I've got for the board, and I welcome board feedback today.
I just wanted to mention, not only do we have it, you said the presentations are on this page, they're also listed in our board packets and are posted prior to the board meeting, so they can get to it two ways, through our board packets or through this page.
Thank you for that. Director Day?
Yeah, thank you. Brian, is there a way to pull up our existing boundaries map that we have on the website?
There is. We could do it through going, to that link, but actually, if you just back up and go to, why don't we go to?
I didn't see it in the packet, but,
We could use any one of the
well, the closest one is the supervisory districts as far as being legible.
Yeah, okay.
Because there's so
Yeah,
much
let's go,
going
let's
on.
use that one, right there.
Well, what's interesting in going through all this is, I'm sure you're in you guys preparing all this, you've become familiar with the terms, packing and cracking, and which are gerrymandering terms. And generally speaking, and certainly the goal for me is communities of interest should stay together as much as possible. And it's not always possible. So for instance, El Dorado Hills is too big to be in one district, and we get that. But in going through this, I discovered we accidentally did cracking last time because El Dorado Hills is actually in 4 districts. And that's something we want to try to avoid. So I would like to request that as you develop these maps, try to come up with something where El Dorado Hills is in no more than 2 districts, which is possible. Cameron Park, ideally, it'd be nice if they could be in 1, but they probably have to be in 2, but no more than 2. So I would like to see that as our goal, and instead of the current 4 districts, which I was kind of like, wow, yeah, that's kind of interesting. Because you have people off Lake Hills Road, which is not far from my house, that are actually in District 3, but they're very much a part of El Dorado Hills,
Yeah.
and very little in common with the folks further out,
Yeah.
and so on. There are a lot of other examples there. So that would be my request, that we try to keep El Dorado Hills to 2 districts and so on.
Yeah, thank you for that. That's the kind of feedback that I'm looking for from the board. Now, whether that's possible, I don't know. For the reason that you pointed out, it's the most populated area in the county, and it's going to come down to whether or not we can logically move the lines around in a way that preserves communities of interest and then limits, as you suggested, the number of divisions in that particular area. So hopefully it is possible, and we're going to do our best.
Yeah, and
I
let
can
me
tell
know
you-
if you need help with, because I know the roads and know the community, if you need help with any of that. Another thing, we had divided Serrano last time. Serrano they all have a lot in common with each other. That would be a nice goal. May not be feasible, but would be a nice goal if they could be kept in 1 district versus being split in 2 or 3. So
Right.
again, those, I think, would be worthwhile goals for us.
Absolutely. Yeah, I share your thinking on that. Director Day, in response to, again, to your comment about, how El Dorado Hills is currently divided, at one of the last presentations, you had asked us to look at that Salmon Falls area that's currently in Division 3 and whether or not that can be incorporated back into Division 5. So I'm working on an alternative that does that. Now, of course, if you move that population into Division 5 is already too high, right? There's already too many customers in Division 5, so we got to move some of those out. So if you move that in, we got to take some out. Where does that come out? Well, maybe it comes out south of 50.
Well, that's pretty much, when you look at it, there's going to be a North El Dorado Hills, a South El Dorado Hills. That's the most logical way to do it. And there is within the community some distinctness between the typically older communities north of 50 and the newer communities south. That makes some logic to do that.
Agreed.
And you'd be moving, like you had pointed out, people from District 5 into District 2 or 4, and they get to vote sooner, so there's
Yeah.
an advantage to that.
It certainly is. So I can guarantee we will have mapping alternatives that do what you just described, that will use Highway 50 and divide El Dorado Hills north and south. Same with Cameron Park, so we're going to try and present alternatives that are logical, that preserve those communities, and really look forward to getting your feedback on that.
Thank you.
Okay, Director Dwyer.
Yes, Brian. Good presentation. You've got a challenging task, a lot of moving parts, and having the privilege and honor to represent District 2, which is probably by any measure that you put up there, the most diverse district in the county. I think it's good and bad. It's good because District 2 has a broad spectrum of interest in all of the services we provide, the water, the wastewater, recycled water, and high density, low density, stretching from Blackstone to Outingdale is pretty diverse populations to try to represent. But the good part of that is, as that district, I have to be familiar with all of the challenges of both the rural and the urban setting. So it's a tough job. I don't know how you can divide it. It's also, in terms of a district representative, presents big challenges in trying to appropriately represent all those diverse interests. So I don't know if there's a good answer.
Well, it is a challenge, but the good news for me is that I don't have to decide. You do. So I just get to move the lines around, and then ultimately the decision will be up to the board. But yeah, it is a challenge. And on that note, I would like to just highlight, we have incredible staff, and all of the maps that I've shown you today, and all of the maps that we will be showing you are, wouldn't be possible without our staff. So I've asked Jan Wolf, our GIS analyst, to be here today, and then Rachel Sarge, the district's legal secretary, because without those two, none of this happens. Jan has created, just the work he's doing on our GIS system to be able to allow imbeciles like myself to do work in this mapping application is really, it's incredible. And so he deserves a lot of recognition for that.
Thank you. Do you have anything? I'm good. Okay. No, I really appreciate your presentation. I'll ask Director Osborne, does he want to say something? Or shall we just say mute the button?
No, he has something to say.
Okay.
Imagine that.
Yes, it is. Am I there? Yes, it's a daunting. I can remember going through this in the last iteration, and it's a daunting task, and a lot of moving parts and a lot of pieces, and forward to some of the projections that they come up with.
Is that all, Director Osborne?
All I have to say, I think we're on the same page.
Okay, great. So I'll just make one comment that, the communities of interest are so important because knowing who your ratepayers are, if you move those boundaries a little bit, some people do get confused and they just don't vote. So it's kind of like midterms and a census change is going to be an interesting election year. So I appreciate all your efforts. And I definitely would love to see how this is all operating on your GIS system. So,
And Brian?
just a little nerd twerk there.
You're planning to bring this drafts to the next board meeting with action for the board in March?
Thanks, Jim, for that reminder. I did want to go over that. Yeah, so the reminder, the deadline for finalizing and adopting final maps is April 17th. I'd like to finish before then. My hope is that we can, at the second meeting in March, adopt final maps. So I will be coming back with draft maps as early, I'm saying the second meeting in February just to give myself a little bit of room. Realistically, I may have maps ready for the next board meeting. But I also don't want, to dominate every single board meeting with this particular topic, unless that's what you'd like to do. So you will for sure see draft maps at the second meeting in February, then possibly the first meeting in March, with final maps adopted the second meeting in March.
Yeah, I would say sooner better than later, because then we can make tweaks and changes, and we have time, it gives you guys time to make those tweaks and changes if we need to, rather than feeling like we're slamming up against a deadline. So even if they're not perfect, I would say it's good to start the process and the conversation.
Okay, any other questions? Thank you very much,
I just want to,
General Counsel.
there does not
There is?
appear there any more members of the public wishing to speak on workshop item number 9, update on reapportioning district divisions. No, does not appear there any additional public comment.
Okay. Thank you very much, General Counsel. And we'll move on to the water status of the update for our water supplies.
President Zini, members of the board, good morning. What a difference a month makes. So we're hopefully have some more additional positive news coming forward. I decided to open up this month's presentation with kind of a photo point that we've been watching, and that is where our main water supply is being fed right now. So on the right of your screen is Camp Creek Inlet through Camp Creek Tunnel, Park Creek at Sly Park, and then Hazel Creek is on your left, and obviously that's not flowing very heavily right now because of the canal, but these are taken early December and early January. So you see the lake has come up sufficiently that we've effectively met the back of the park, which is really, really exciting for a number of reasons, just a general barometer of water supply, but also, as you recall from some of our photos earlier this year, the amount of sediment that was being transported through that delta in the high flows earlier this year was, as Joe Manager has described this morning, was problematic for treatment operations. Next slide, please. Here we go. Okay, our customers continue to conserve. We're over 15% again, 18 in December. For a comparison, our neighbors down the hill are averaging about 12%, so we always like to be ahead of the game there. So late December was a very welcome change. Significant boost to the reservoir, and so much inflow to Folsom Reservoir, they actually had to increase releases to maintain flood control capacity. It does seem awkward in a drought, and you probably saw some of the media attention related to that, and I'll dive into that just a little bit today in case you do receive any questions from your constituents about that. Our snow conditions, when I came to you last month, we had no snow on the ground, so obviously snow conditions significantly improved. We are continuing to see that indication of La Nina-ish, cooler ocean conditions, chance of below normal precip for the last part of this winter, and so we are still remaining vigilant and trying to make sure we maximize our storage. Next slide, please. So for those that are watching online, our current year is our red, and so looking at our comparison years, as you can see this past spring, our demands were up across the board as well as all of our neighbors. And we've really turned the corner on that coming into late summer, across that line, and then throughout the fall, both from increased awareness of water supply conditions and above normal precip, we've been even greater than 15% conservation of the board requested. Next slide. Next slide is just a regional comparison from Regional Water Authority, which is the greater Sacramento region, similarly performing, although we are doing a little bit better than some of our other neighbors. Next slide. So Jacobson carryover, very different picture from when I started giving you updates earlier this summer. Given our projection of demand in the spring and where we anticipate that to continue, and assuming a typical fall, we're looking just under 16,000 acre feet. So we came in almost 10,000 acre feet more, which is really, really positive news. And we continue to gain about 5 acre feet per hour, so about 100 acre feet per day. And that is, even though it hasn't rained in several weeks, that's that snow that's doing exactly what we want to do in the Camp Creek watershed. We know from history when Camp Creek, how it typically performs, but unfortunately, it's a lot different now that without any trees there, we're hoping that we not have a lot of sublimation where the snow goes directly to water vapor And we are seeing it continue to perform, and keep our fingers crossed it'll slowly melt and come in through the tunnel into the reservoir. We're not seeing any noticeable change yet, but this is just something we're very sensitive to as a result of the fire. Next slide. And we talked earlier this year, and this is our historical comparison chart, again, this year being red. We talked about that hope for an inflection, an increasing slope in the fall. Conservatively, we were projecting it to continue to go down or flatten. As you can see, a nice turn, and we made a real positive change over the past month. Next slide, please. We've been talking about Hazel Creek Tunnel and the urgency of getting the canal back online. Fortunately, Mother Nature has done some of that work for us, done a lot of work for us, actually, through Camp Creek, so there's a decreased criticality of that. We still may need to use that later this spring. We're watching that closely, and right now, hopefully, if everything continues in a positive direction, it's the hydrogeneration loss that we're focusing on now, not necessarily water supplies. So, but we'll continue to give you monthly updates, but right now, it's looking like Mother Nature's doing exactly what we'd like her to do. Next slide. Okay. And these are our reservoir storage status as of last Tuesday when our board packet's finalized. Not much change, and really the reason that is that all of our Project 184 reservoirs are honestly as full as they can be this time of year. We can't take on any more water and safely manage them according to all the requisite requirements. Jacobson Lake, we've actually gained another 600 acre feet since I published this number. This morning we broke 29,400. So 6 more days, 600 more acre feet, so really positive. Folsom, we've actually continued to trend down a little bit, and I'll talk about that in a second. And Weber Reservoir is continuing to spill. Next slide.
And Dan, before you leave,
Yes.
Echo Lake, is that normal?
It is.
Okay, or is it because of the conduit damage to the
It's actually, that's a normal condition every winter. So we have 6 feet of flashboards. As of November 15th, all of those flashboards are removed every year. One thing that was an anomaly, you may recall from our last update, was the Division of Safety Dams actually gave us a temporary variance to hold back some additional water when we were concerned about drought, which we still are concerned. We were more concerned about water supply conditions. Then we had so much snow, we had to get rid of the water. So then we went ahead and pulled the last of the flashboards. But typically by early December, you'll see 0 all the way through till April 1st when we start to put in the boards.
Okay, thanks. I know we've been focused on the flumes, but there was damage to the Echo Lake conduit as well, wasn't there?
There was. I'm happy to say that staff were able to complete all those repairs.
All right,
All right.
good, thank you.
All right, thanks, Jen. So you may recall, I think it was the last board update, I talked about that miracle fall where Folsom Reservoir gained 250,000 acre feet in a matter of a few months, and that was the fall of 1977 into 78. We followed that projection, that blue line, the lighter blue line is 1978. We followed that to a T where we gained almost 250,000 acre feet in about a month. It just kind of shows. When you look at the storage curve, though, it does look quite odd, and why is it going the wrong direction now? And Jen, if you can change the slide there, I'll explain in a second. And this is actually the exact question that Director Day brought up a couple meetings ago, and that is the dual purpose requirement of Folsom Reservoir. At a minimum, Folsom Reservoir maintains about 400,000 acre feet of flood storage in the winter, and that's that flood control reserve there. And then with the new water control manual update that the Corps of Engineers with all of the stakeholders providing input adopted, was there's this variable number in the bottom, sort of the lighter blue hash line on the bottom. And what that is, it may have to add up to another 200,000 acre feet of variable storage. And what that, they look at basin wetness, which is upstream moisture conditions, how full are your upstream reservoirs. Well, in December, a lot of those reservoirs filled. So they're actually a little below that solid blue line, and you'll see in just a minute. If you can, next slide, please. So I superimposed that red line on there, and they basically encroached, and they said, uh-oh. So they increase releases a little bit, and they'll try to kind of hug that red line. And so we should see something like that through the rest of the winter, so don't be too alarmed. That's it's doing what it's supposed to, but unfortunately, being a dual-purpose reservoir, They just can't take on all the water.
Well, the challenge, that goes to what, is that March 1st or approximately?
It starts to, March 15th, it starts to increase.
They can start to store more.
Right,
And the big factor is the snowpack, because if we get warm, wet rain and wash away a lot of snowpack, they'll just let it go on through,
right.
and then we end up losing that. So
Right.
that's what's critical the next couple of months, of that it stay cold.
Yeah, we definitely want a mild several months. That's a very good point. Thank you, Director Day. And so we're going to continue to follow this, but this will likely about the curve you'll see. So, okay, and go for it too. Thank you. Okay. While Folsom is doing very, very well, the Bureau of Reclamation and Department of Water Resources, as we look at the overall water supply status for the state of California in 2022, they have to look system-wide. And so these are their water supply storage on a statewide basis. And the green lines are the average. So if you look around California, you see Folsom is the only reservoir above its historical average right now. So other places are lagging, 1 million or more acre feet. You look at Shasta, Oroville on the top, San Luis Reservoir. There's a long way to go as a state to catch up and to get out of this drought. So the reason that we watch this is we look at how might Folsom Reservoir be used this spring. So even though it'd be full, you can expect that to drop pretty rapidly later this spring and into summer, and that goes into what our allocation might be. So this is all just prognostications based upon history and our experience, but we are planning to use Permit 2112 if needed this year in order to make sure we have adequate supplies at Folsom, because our water supply contract, given what we see right now, is likely to be constrained again this year. Next slide. Okay, so this is our this is a snowpack, snow pillow, so remote sensing at Carson Pass. This is above Caples Lake. This is our best barometer for overall water supply conditions. The green is the 50% or the historical average, and black is this year. And so as you see, each one of those lines is about 10 or 15%. We were up on the 90th percentile for the year of historical records by about the beginning of January. Right after Christmas, we had that snow. And you can see what's happened since then. So we went from 90% without any snow, and that line actually flat or even decreasing a little with some melt. We're almost back to 50% again. Or excuse me, almost back to 100%, where we were about 190%. So it's a huge, it just shows you where even though we got a lot of snow, we need that snow to keep coming. So we're still faring slightly better, especially given the amount of carryover storage we have, but we definitely need and want more snow up there. Next slide, please. Okay, I'm just going to quickly run through what we're seeing. You went outside this morning. This is pretty much, as you know, what we've seen, and it's been Groundhog Day for a few weeks now. Very dry and very mild temperatures. Next slide. And it's continuing to show this, although the update that was published last night is starting to show some green, so it's good. So we're starting to see that hopefully first week of February that we are going to start to see some precip come in. It doesn't look too strong, but it's better than seeing this at least. So next slide. And just looking at the month ahead, 50-50. And then as a whole, it's still kind of average, maybe slightly drier for the rest of the spring. Okay, next slide. This is really positive news. So this is looking all across the United States on drought tendency. We finally moved to that sort of khaki color, and what that means is that we are starting to improve our drought supply conditions, which is first time we've seen that in probably a good 18 months. So very positive news. Next slide. And then overall, as I said, still kind of trending that slightly below normal, maybe a ½ degree Celsius throughout the spring. So, not expecting any big, very large amounts of precip for the rest of the year, and we're planning for that to happen as a whole. Next slide. Okay, now I'm going to turn it over to Rudenko, who's going to provide you an update on our disinfection byproduct discussion. We had shared that at our last meeting, and he has some favorable updates and then some look ahead into how we anticipate continue to face that in 2022.
Good morning, Board. Radenko Djakovic. I'm here this morning to give you a quick update what we experienced from August up to now regarding water quality in our distribution system. As we all remember, mid-August, Coldor fire started and affected the whole county, a lot of people, a lot of our customers, a lot of our employees, and EID as well. Virtually all portions of Camp Creek watershed and Park Creek watershed experienced high fire intensity. Just when we started recovering from Coldor fire impact and emergency operation, we were hit late October and early November with 2 big storms. At the time, our major source for main system, major source of the water from main system, Sly Park Lake, was on a very low stage. On one hand, because of drought conditions, and on other hand, because of the summer demand that is traditionally high and brings lake down. In the fall, when these storms happen, usually system demand is going down, and that results in a long residence time of drinking water in our system. Next slide, please. Storm impact. We experience high-intensity rain that caused significant runoff and erosion from Camp Creek watershed and Park Creek watershed that were affected with Coldor fire from fire scars, and localized local stream that entering a lake with high precipitation pretty much did almost the same damage as Camp Creek and Park Creek and caused high debris flows to the lake, high suspended solids context, and created enormously high turbidity and conditions at treatment facilities that were very challenging to overcome. That water had high content of natural organic matter, and natural organic matter is actually main source of the total organic carbon. Thank you. Total organic carbon that was present in that water. Next slide, please. How we responded to these challenges. We started aggressively mitigation of natural organic matter through oxidation, coagulation, and other treatment barriers. Increased dose on pre-chlorination to maximize oxidation of the natural organic matter, as well as iron and manganese. We increased also post-chlorination to keep water that we're producing healthy and up to primary drinking water standards. Experiencing turbidity over 130 nephelometric units pretty much caused extraordinary number of backwashes at that facility at Reservoir A water treatment plant. We actually, with flow that we run through the filters, we could, in normal situation, we can pass with 4 backwashes a day. During these events, we had continuous backwashing, and when you consider that one backwash takes 40 minutes, we actually reached number of 24 backwashes in a day. That caused another issue, where to store backwash water, how to process that backwash water back, because per regulations, we can bring just 10% and match with the water that can be from the lake. But on the end, thanks to Reservoir A team, we were able to go through these challenges.
Rudenko?
Yes.
I got a question on backwashes. 24 a day, how long does it take? That would be an hour on a 24 hour.
40 minutes, 40 minutes.
So
But
just
we
continuous
had
backwash.
some delays because of amount of backwash water that we're putting on drying beds. And, but we were able to manage it and go through. Besides that operation, main task was close monitoring on water quality that we're putting in the system that meets primary drinking water standards. And also, if something starts to going south, to have a quick reaction, adjust chemicals. And at that time, we were actually running a facility 24/7 with the crew. As a result of these events, just a week after November event, we had scheduled a main system disinfection by product sampling. And we did it. First results came, every single site. We have 8 sites to the main system. Every single site was elevated. Next slide, please. It's very sensitive. Summary of issues and experience from a series of events. Pretty much source water quality had impact on treatment processes, elevated turbidity, natural organic matter, total organic carbon, high chlorine demand, chlorine interaction with total organic carbon and natural organic matter creates disinfection byproducts. Calculation, a compliance calculation is based on location running annual average based on quarterly data. All the DBPs were elevated on every single sampling locations. We stayed in compliance. We expect similar issues with every runoff, snow melt for a couple of years, because a lake, when it's on low stage, is very vulnerable for regarding high turbidity. Pretty much, turbid water came straight to diversion pipe. Next slide, please. Here is one of the charts that I would like to present to you. It's pretty much historical, 2 years of total organic carbon concentration. And you can see we had one event in January 2021. We were around 2.3 milligrams per liter. At these events, on the right side of the chart, we reached 2.7. Numerically, it's not a big difference. In January 2021, we didn't have issues. This time, we did. What we learned, pretty much extremely high turbidity, extremely high dose of chlorine created disinfection byproduct. Next slide, please. These 2 slides on the left side, you have trihalomethanes. On the right side, helioacetic acids. This dashed line on both slides. On first slide starts from 80 micrograms per liter. that's maximum contaminant level, we need to be all the time below that line. On helioacidics is 60 micrograms per liter. And you can see we went up, and after that down. Next slide, please.
And Rudenko, on those, that slide there, it shows maybe one peak there, but it's an annual,
Yeah.
annual average
Location running
for them.
Annual average. And, you know, we were in compliance on the end of the year. Next slide, please. Mitigating strategy. We actually, when we see what's going on in the system, we started multiple sampling every week to monitor what's going on throughout the system, to learn more and eventually develop a good strategy to mitigate it from treatment facility all the way to last customer. In order to do that, we had to engage industry experts. We were working with water quality treatment solutions for a long time, and this time we consulted them and to discuss and eventually define direction and solution for the problem we experiencing. After evaluation of a couple of different options, we agreed that only option that possibly can work is granulated activated carbon installation on one of the clusters of a Reservoir A water treatment facility. As a result of that, water quality treatment solution went and developed a technical memorandum based on data that we collected from November to December. That technical memorandum was submitted to Division of Drinking Water for approval and eventually review and additional suggestions. Approval is still pending, and after we receive authorization to proceed with this, we will go and do pilot study, because even this is only option, unique option, we need to check it out. Is it going to work or not? And during pilot study, we will run one filter with granulated activated carbon and another filter that will have media that mimic what we have on treatment facility. Sample every day and compare water quality that is coming from these filters. When everything is done, and hopefully with positive outcome, we have intention to go and install this media sometimes late summer or early fall. Next slide, please. And, you know, whatever we do, we need money. In order,
This is what this is all about, right?
in order to save money, we need to spend. Anticipated costs for pilot study, approval process, media installation, sampling, we expect around $800,000. Expectation is not based on nothing. I got preliminary quotes for media installation is $650,000. Pilot study is $100,000, and some consulting fees for technical memorandum and report after pilot study that's going to be generated it's gonna be in the range of 800,000. Good thing is, during this process, we contacted different agencies that experienced similar challenges from watersheds that were affected with the fire. I think Calaveras County had similar issue, and they actually got a decent chunk of money from FEMA to mitigate source water quality. And we expected that these expenses will be reimbursed from FEMA. Next slide, please. Oh, this is Carson Pass, our guys measuring snowmelt. Any questions?
Yeah, any questions for Rudenko? No? Thank you very much for your presentation. The answer is always in the taste when you turn on your tap, and we can tell our neighbors why it did taste funny for a while, so.
I do
Yeah,
have a
and
question.
Rodenko, great job. And remember, Board, this is our workhorse treatment plant that serves almost the entire county most of the time.
Right.
So $800,000 to mitigate some of the issues from the Caldor fire, it's a large number, but still, it serves the entire county.
That is not ultimate solution. That is just
Part.
patch to go through this until lake regain itself. And historically, Jenkinson Lake had a really good water, but now is impacted with debris flow, with organic matter, total organic carbon, ash, minerals. Yeah. Thank
All right, thank you very much.
you.
Any other questions from the public?
Yes, we do have a member of the public that would like to speak. Director George Osborne.
I have a question. How much impact has the runoff from the Caldor fire impacted our water supply in Folsom? Has that been mitigated by the high flows, or is that something that we need to be looking at? And the other thing is when we get the flume and Res 1 back online, that will mitigate this problem also. Is that not correct?
First, let's talk about Folsom. First storm event was mitigated in a way that facility was shut down 24 hours. Because we have a luxury at that facility, especially during fall, to pull water from upper side of the system from Sly Park, water treatment facility, or Reservoir 1 when it's online. Another thing, Folsom Lake wasn't impacted so much by turbidity. Highest turbidity that they experienced at El Dorado Hills was 40 NTUs, nephelometric turbidity units. Sly Park had 134, what was recorded, much higher. Folsom Lake is, even at that stage when it was low, it was much bigger water body with higher buffering potential. And we didn't experience so much issues at El Dorado Hills. Of course, source water was affected because some of the fire scars were washed in South Fork American River and eventually reached areas where with the whirling water. And we can have some organoleptic properties of the water that people will notice. But we can mitigate these issues with the flushing, refreshing it, and, you know, especially sensitive portion of population can detect that it's something a little bit different. Now about Reservoir 1 and flumes. Of course, when we get nice, clean, alpine water through the pipe to Reservoir 1, it's gonna be much cleaner, you know, but also will help main system kind of with blending Sly Park water and this very clean water that comes from conventional treatment facility. And it's really important to stress that in these kind of situations, the best facility that can respond to these challenges are conventional treatment facilities. That means multiple treatment barriers, you know, in a series before you put water on the filters and disinfect it. I think Res 1 will help.
Thank you, sir.
Okay, thank you. Are there any members of the public who wish to ask questions?
It does not appear there are additional members of the public wishing to speak on information item number 10.
All right, thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
And all this information is up on our internet website for digestion. This pun intended. All right, action items. We have action item number 11, finance.
I'll move option 1.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been motioned and moved and seconded. And,
Recuse myself from this item.
okay, Director Bierkamp is recusing himself. Are there any members of the public who wish to ask questions about this or make a comment?
It does not appear at this time there are any members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 11, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Day.
Okay, thank you very much. This is an action item, and it's ready for a vote.
Division 2, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right. Item number 12, finance regarding Owen equipment.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I'm Noel Russell. I'm your construction and maintenance supervisor for Drinking Water Construction. I'm here today to ask you for some funding.
That easy, huh?
Move one. There we go. I'm here to ask you to consider awarding a contract to Owen Equipment in the not-to-exceed amount of $860,917 for the purchase of 2 HHX Prodigy TruVac hydro-excavation machines. I want to add a little clarity, and we can do that on the next slide. Recently, on January 3rd, we had an unfortunate fire that destroyed our existing hydro-excavation truck. It was our intention to, so we've been researching for an additional truck over the last year. And unfortunately, the fire happened, and we were going to ask you for the additional truck on the last board meeting on the 10th. And then the fire happened on the 3rd, so we pulled that, and I'm now asking you for a replacement and then also an additional to meet our growing work demand. Does that make sense? Okay.
Insurance cover any of this?
It's gonna, the insurance is gonna I can't really speak to that a lot, but it's gonna cover depreciated value, so far as I know. Dan, do you want to speak?
I told Noel if that question came up, I'd answer it for him. So I had that same exact question Director Day, so thank you. Mark had advised me. So whatever is not reimbursed by the insurance claim will be paid from the district's insurance reserve fund. So yes is the short answer. The replacement vehicle will be paid from the reserve fund. The new vehicle will be paid from the drinking water operations budget for this year.
How much of where were we on depreciated value on that? the life of the truck?
We've been working with Aqua JPIA, and we submitted the claim. We've yet to hear back on what portion will be, but they've already come and done their inspection, so.
All right. Continue.
Thank you. Okay, next slide, please. So construction crews respond to about 700 leaks on mains and services in combination every year on average. And what we're seeing a trend in is failures on water service lines in areas of utility conflict. And I've got a slide after this that will talk a little bit about what utility conflict looks like. So we're working in those areas for proactive and responsive to failure service line replacement. That can include electrical, natural gas, propane, sewer, storm sewer, telecom, fiber optic, cable TV, sometimes in combination, all in a big cluster, and sometimes it'll be just one or two depending on the area. So to safely replace water service lines, we rely on this equipment daily to expose that utility conflict, to verify that we have clearance from the water, between the water service line and whatever conflicting utility is there. So it helps preserve safety and efficiency in a big way. Next slide. So just to talk a little bit about utility conflict, the last time I talked to you guys about this, I'm not sure everyone was present. But on the top right, you can see an area that's in a subdivision where all of the utilities are underground. And when we share the ground with utilities, you can see, we'll call in an underground service alert, you can see the markings on the ground. And then on the lower left, after we've exposed all those utilities via hydro excavation, you can see the water line, the water service line that traverses underneath all of those to the meter. The top one is the top yellow one is a gas main, along with telecom and primary power. You can imagine what that would look like if you dug into that with a backhoe, or if we did it with a trenchless replacement with a blade. There's potential to cut into a gas main and into other utilities. And then there's another example on the right where we encounter this a lot of times in some of the subdivisions where we're experiencing failure. That water service line is in very close proximity and sometimes even in contact with other conflicting utilities. And the scary one is gas. On the lower right, you can see where.
Everything looks pretty shallow. I'm surprised. Even the gas line, all that stuff, it looks really not very deep. I'm surprised.
Yeah, that's about average depth. The picture may not be giving it justification, but you know, I've seen them as shallow as 6 or 8 inches deep in some areas, and as deep as 6 or 8 feet in other areas. So it really varies depending on subdivision and terrain issues.
Right.
Next slide, please. So as I said, we rely on them every day. We have experienced the current brand of hydro excavation truck that we own has been, I guess I could say, kind of unreliable. It had spent quite a bit of time in the shop as opposed to being in the field. So like I said, in 2021, we started looking at alternatives when we were going to add an additional hydro excavation truck. So based on research and collaboration with other agencies and contractors, we're recommending the Vactor brand going forward. Now, just to give you a little bit of background, I've worked here for, well, quite a while. And back in the mid-90s, one of my first assignments was to work on a Vactor brand truck. And looking at that truck back in the mid-90s and then looking at the demo model that we looked at, very little has changed, which tells me that if it works, stick with it. So, okay, next slide. So using hydro excavation trucks versus a trailer-mounted unit like we used to, we accomplish the same task in a third of the time. We can accomplish in 20 minutes with a hydro excavation truck what might take a half a day for a man to do with a shovel. Just to give you a little bit of perspective on the efficiency that it achieves. We use them for water main and service breaks, to assist with safe excavation under emergencies and trench dewatering. Helps control flow when a valve is not closing completely, it's not completely seated. We're able to keep a hole dry without having to discharge muddy water into potential waterways. And also compliance with DOT and Caltrans permit requirements. They, of course, like us to leave a clean job site behind us. So these machines help us do a really good job with that and make quick work of it. Next slide, please. So as opposed to the trailer units, these have a truck-mounted boom with a 6-inch intake and removable lightweight aluminum tubing for suction, so they rarely become plugged and they don't have to fight with them. And just to reiterate, hydro excavation is a safe, proven method of exposing utilities without damaging or exposing the crew to any unnecessary or elevated risk. It's been recognized by 811 and the Common Ground Alliance as a safe and effective alternative to hand digging. So look at that, next slide. So we've had an increased work volume in areas of utility conflict, so that necessitates, in our view, the procurement of an additional truck. That's where construction crews are repairing failing lines in areas of utility conflict, and also the capital improvement crew who are performing proactive service line replacement in those areas of utility conflict as well. And just as a side note, that particular project is currently on track, and I'll be back in a few weeks to talk to you more about that. Next slide, please. So for pricing, Own Equipment has 2 of those that are available for $397,650 plus tax, for a total of $860,916.58. So we got a couple of different quotes, and we will save about $261,000 by selecting the Vactor unit as compared to Vacon. And additionally, those units are available and on the ground immediately. The Vacon would have to be built if we chose to go that direction with 150 to 200 day lead time. I was told verbally it might be as much as a year out. So that's that. Next slide, please. So Sourcewell achieves best pricing by combining buying power of more than 500,000 government, education, and nonprofit organizations. We use a network of local vendors, which have been awarded these contracts to procure a variety of items, including this one I'm asking you about today. Most items have a large discount, and I'd like to recommend option 1 to award the contract to Own Equipment in the not-to-exceed amount of $860,917 for the purchase of 2 Prodigy TruVac hydro excavation machines, or take other action as directed by you.
Okay. Many questions from the board?
Yes, I've got a couple
Please.
observations, questions. One is the 2 competing brands, the Vacon and the, what's the other one?
Vactor?
Vactor.
Yeah.
That, I certainly hope, and I doubt that it's, I hope that they're comparable and we're choosing the right one, not just because they're available right away, but
They're comparable in terms of what they do and their capacities and things like that, yes.
which one's a better machine?
Well, the better machine, in my view, and my little bit of experience here, is the Vactor machine. Like I talked to you about the one I saw in the 1990s, the one I operated. We wore that truck out after many, many years of service.
Okay.
And then at one point, we as an organization decided to move toward the Vacon brand, and I think at the time, that was largely price-driven. And those have proven to be not as reliable as what I've experienced with the Vactor brand.
Okay, from a guy that's been there and run the equipment, that
Yes, sir.
carries a lot of weight.
Thank you.
How about the experience, I think, county DOT, there, as I recall, a few years ago, there was a big falderall about them buying a similar machine, and some of the public were up in arms on how could you spend this much money. What's the experience on DOT? Have you talked to them on how their machines work?
I'm glad you asked that. They do have one machine, and I think it's been about 17 years. I flew back to Streeter, Illinois, to the Vactor manufacturing plant to pick up one of our trucks. And at that time, they were building DOT's truck. I recently reached out to the highway superintendent of DOT to ask him how that truck was holding up. He said, she's wore out, but they've had good luck with it, and they're gonna renew that vehicle with another one in kind. They're looking for another Vector. They've been very happy with it, but it's aged out and has performed its duties.
And then I guess thank you. And my final comment on that was replacing the trailer mount unit with another truck seems to be a good thing to do. You know, safety of our people that are, quote, in the trenches, and these machine service people that are really in the trenches is
Literal
premier.
sense.
And it looks like this machine will help improve their working conditions and their safety. So
Yes, sir.
I'll move option 1.
Okay.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded
Thank you.
for option 1. Question from Director Day.
Jennifer, could you pull that back up and go back to the picture of the pipes? I like pictures of pipes.
I have lots more.
I do too.
There it is.
Yeah, so our line, which is going perpendicular to all the other pipes.
Yes.
Is that the old plastic piping that we're getting rid of?
Yes,
Yeah.
it is. So that's polyethylene tubing, which
Right.
we're currently replacing responsive and proactively with polyethylene coated K-type copper.
Right, okay,
Yeah, which has proven to stand up to the test of time, superior material.
yeah, excellent, thank you.
Any other questions?
All right. Are there any questions from the public?
At this time, it does not appear there are any additional members of the public wishing to speak on action item number 12, option 1, moved by Director Dwyer and seconded by Director Veerkamp.
All right. Here's your moment to vote.
Can you please vote again? Division 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
All right. We'll go on to item number 13. Engineering is making the presentation.
Good morning. My name is Kaylee DeLongchamp. I'm an associate engineer here at the district, and I am here to talk about the Upper Main Ditch Piping Project. So this is just a summary of the previous board actions, which was when we awarded the multiple contracts for the construction of the project, as well as included the project on our 2022-2026 CIP. So just a summary of the issue. First, I'm going to give you an overall project status update on the project, and then I'll get into the contract change order number 8, which is why I'm here. Just a little background. So the project objectives for this project is we want to protect the source water and drinking water quality, reduce water loss in the ditch, reduce operations and maintenance costs, as well as eliminate potential safety issues with an open conveyance. A little project background. This project will install 12,725 lineal feet, 42-inch welded steel pipe. It'll install 10 air release valves, 6 blow-offs, 16 cathodic protection test stations, the inlet vault piping and valving, and then, of course, Blair Road paving at the end of the project. So, status update. So, following award in 2020, the contractor immediately got to work with the submittal process and material acquisition. And then they were able to get out in June of last year to start constructing the pipe. And then we are expecting to have the pipe ready for service either late this month or early next, weather dependent. And then, of course, the final paving of Blair Road will take place in the spring. We're expecting that to take 6 weeks. So these are just some fun pictures from the Blair Road installation. So you can see some of the fun projects. So on the left, they were putting in shoring so that they could ensure safety while they installed the pipe. In the middle, that's where they're putting AB over the top of the pipe. And then on the right is a portion of Blair Road where there is a intense decline. So that is just blanking on the word, but it keeps the pipe in place so that it ensures the pipe stays. So this is some pictures of the cross-country installation. So again, we can see we had a portion as we came off of the ditch down into Blair Road near Forbay that it was a very severe decline, and so we had to make sure we used measures to keep the pipe in place. Okay, sorry. So these are some pictures from along the ditch. So you can see where the pipe, in order to accommodate the pipe installation, they filled the ditch in, installed the pipe along what's the berm of the ditch, and then redug the ditch. And so on the right there, we see a picture of it when it was completed in 2 different locations. And then this is some pictures from when they installed the pipe near the Forbay Valve House. I especially like the one in the top left where they were taking it's a 40-foot stick of pipe, and they were taking it along the dam. And then these are some pictures from when they were installing the piping at the inlet structure to Reservoir 1. So at the top left one, they're installing the meter. And then the bottom right one is where they're installing the pipe that goes into that vault that we see in one of the middle ones. And then also can see the updates we made to the ditch to accommodate flows due to flooding and such. So public outreach, that's been a big one for this project. So we wanted to make sure we kept the public informed as we performed this project. So prior to construction starting in June, we sent out letters to the surrounding residents. We also had specific business cards made for the project that had the phone number, the project email, the project website. And so we handed those out as anyone came up to the site going, hey, what's going on? Can we get more information? We also had 2 signs that were posted. One was at the intersection of Forbay and Blair Road, and the other was at the intersection of Pony Express and Blair Road. And again, those had the same information as the business cards. We made 32 updates to the project website in the course of construction. On the right there is an example of one of our pictures with the update. It would show where the road closure for Blair Road was expected to be for the next 3 weeks or so. We also monitored the project email, and we had myself, the project representative, available by phone, and then had door hanger notification for the road closure about a month prior to road closure occurring.
I have a question for you on that one. How was the response? Did you receive a lot of calls?
I did not receive a lot of calls. We actually had a pretty positive response to the project out there. With any construction project, there are always a couple issues, and so those were handled in an effective and timely manner.
Okay, thank you.
So remaining work, this has actually changed. I called my inspector out there this morning, and he informed me that there's actually only 1 air release valve left to do, and they're going to be starting that tomorrow. And then they are actually performing the last blow-off valve today. So that's good news. We're getting even closer to completion. There's still a bit of piping to be completed at the inlet vault. They also haven't installed the cathodic protection test stations.
I can't hear you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
What would you say?
They haven't installed the cathodic protection test stations.
Okay.
They are also in the midst of installing the raw water service lines for the 4 services that were fed off of the ditch previously. We're in the midst of programming for the pipe, and they are still performing pipe testing, which is pressure testing. And then there's a couple punch list items, and of course, the final paving of Blair Road.
On the final paving, Blair Road is pretty narrow. Are we going to pave the whole road or just half of it where the overlay the trench for the pipe was?
So we're going to be paving the one half where the trench was, and then we'll be doing an overlay of the other lane. So we'll do a grind and overlay. So in the end, it'll look like a brand new road for the
Great.
duration.
We should get the county to say thank you.
So this is a little project schedule update that reflects the actual dates versus what was previously. This is pretty much within 1 month of what we have thought it was going to be when we brought this forward for approval. So the project has been going really well. So change order number 8. So there's an existing 6-inch asbestos cement water line in the berm of the ditch. This is about 300 feet downstream of Forbay, and then you can see in that picture with the red arrow the water coming out of the berm, which is where the water line broke. So this pipeline is probably 30 years old, and it was found to be about 18 inches in depth, which is very shallow. These are just a couple more pictures of that leak. As you can see, pretty much what happened is that pipe crushed.
Does that come from a resident's house?
No, so this is a 6-inch pipeline that comes down off of Drop-Off Road and feeds the residents on Blair Road
Okay,
with water.
all right.
So we crushed it with heavy equipment that was moving over the top of the line?
Yes. So you can see on the left that pipeline, I highlighted the note for it. We potholed this pipeline during design, and it was felt that we could construct the pipeline while keeping it in place. We also called out in the contract drawings for the contractor to again pothole so that they knew where it was and that they could protect it. So the contractor did use methods for protection. In the first picture, you could see that there were steel plates on top of the pipeline to try and protect it. Unfortunately, the pipeline still broke because it's older.
Soil compaction issue, all that stuff.
So, given that the pipe broke, and knowing that if we continue to try and construct this 42-inch parallel to this 6-inch, we would continue to break it, have continued leaks, continued water outages for customers served off that line. The decision was made to go ahead and install approximately 400 lineal feet of 6-inch pipe within the ditch so that we could get that pipe out of the way of the project and keep this project moving forward. So when we approved the project back in 2020, the board approved a contingency funding of about $2 million. As of so far, we have only spent $165,000 in change orders, which is fantastic. And with this change order, it'll only go up to $284,000, which is about 2.6% of the change orders for the contract. So I recommend option 1, approve contract change order number 8 to Steve P. Rados, Inc. in the not to exceed amount of $119,881.09 for additional work associated with the relocation of a 6-inch water line for the Upper Main Ditch piping project.
I'll move option 1. I'll second, with a comment, of course. I think this project is on the consent calendar. There was discussion of the water conservation or savings from doing this of 1,000 to 2,000 acre feet per year, which would serve 2,000 to 4,000 customers or more. So I think it's important that we recognize the side benefits of this, this project, and the change order, the water conservation would pay, more than pay for the change order.
All right. There's a motion and a second on approval of this item number 14. Is there any public comment?
For action item number 13, option 1, moved by Director Verkamp and seconded by Director Dwyer. It appears that there are no members of the public. Whoa, yes, we do. Director Osborne.
I was thinking it would not.
Don't let us down, George.
Just a question, I don't have, being as I just got in late last night about 10:30, I have not looked at CIP. Was that 6-inch line on our CIP for replacement?
No.
Okay. Oh, it's just a consequence of construction, and we just have to live with it.
That is correct.
Okay,
Okay.
thanks.
Any more comments? All right. There's a motion on the floor here to vote.
Division 2, 3, 4, and 5, voting aye, motion carries.
President Anzini, I'd just like to compliment Kaylee as the project manager on this project. It was a very positive project for the district, although I had a lot of, some neighborhoods not very happy with us. And she was able to manage this project very well, minimal. I think I got one call out of the whole construction one that you handled immediately. So I just want to thank you for your dedication on managing this project. So great job. And I mean, my God, the change orders is almost nothing. So again, great job.
Thank you.
Great.
Good work.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate that your ability to calm the waters up there was beneficial to all of us, because I certainly, in the beginning, got a lot of calls, but now I've received nothing. So, thank you.
Thank you.
All right. That ends our action items. We are now moving for adjournment, but there should be some last-minute things that we want to talk about here.
Yeah, just for the record and a reminder, closed session A listed on the agenda was removed at the request of staff at the adoption of today's agenda. We have a couple direction to staff, but no review of assignments. It just encourage board members to take a look at the tentatively scheduled items and reach out if they have any questions. And if nobody has anything further, President Anzini, you can call for that adjournment.
Okay, so the meeting is adjourned.